So as we mentioned, it's kind of it is the Advent season, which means we're kind of leading up to Christmas. And I was kind of curious, on a larger scale, like what kind of Christmas was it going to be this year? I mean, last year was a pretty quiet Christmas. We were pretty much in lockdowns, right? So there wasn't much going on then. So I was kind of curious, was it going to be another quiet Christmas this year? We got, still got COVID things we're battling. The inflation rate is kind of quite incredibly high. So I was wondering, are people just going to kind of stay home and just kind of say, I'm just not doing it this year? But that certainly doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, I'm kind of a data guy. I like looking at stats and reports and stuff. So I was kind of looking at what the stock analysts were saying around the retail sector. What were they expecting for the retail sector this Christmas? And they're actually expecting, believe it or not, a record shopping season. And when I say record, I don't mean just better than last year, like better than ever. And I was kind of curious. It's like, there's a lot going on, and how are we able to do that? And I was thinking that, and please understand, I'm not saying that with condemnation. I'm just saying that I was kind of surprised that that's kind of where we are as a society. And then I was thinking that, well, we've all been locked up for a really long time. And we're kind of ready to get out there and kind of get as close to normal as we can. And I think also that we've had this long period of time where it has been difficult to connect with other people in our lives. And Christmas time is a time where we tend to connect more. And so I think that the momentum of all that has really kind of put us out there and be willing to kind of step out more. And my hope is that we are all able to embrace that this Christmas season, that as we go into the Christmas season, that we do those things we enjoy, connect with the people in our lives. Go out shopping if that's your thing. I mean, I love exchanging gifts with my wife and my family, and those are good things. Connecting with family are good things. But what I would hope that we don't do is we get so caught up in the excitement of that side of Christmas that we miss kind of the deeper meaning of Christmas, the deeper things that we do. And part of kind of embracing this true meaning of Christmas is part of what the Advent season is about. But the Advent season itself is not a magical season. It doesn't magically make something happen. What we're doing is we are intentionally kind of taking time. Because so often that when we look at a holiday like Christmas, we can try to load so much into that one day and build up so many expectations about that one day that we can sometimes guarantee our own disappointment. That we expected all the problems and challenges we've had and family members that we have not got along with in 40 years, we're going to suddenly get along with on that one day. Right? Those sort of things don't happen. So a big part of the Advent season is a time of preparation, is that to actually kind of take a few weeks and think about what it all means. Now, what we kind of talk about here is the kind of those fundamental elements, these themes of Christmas. Last week we talked about hope. This week we talk about joy. My encouragement for all of us would be that as we're looking towards Christmas Day, let's prepare ourselves for the entire thing. If there are relationships that are strained, maybe take these few weeks and try to reconnect a little bit and actually spend some time trying to reconnect with people. Or maybe if it's a relationship that is so strained that it's going to remain strained, sometimes we just prepare ourselves, right, to be able to be around people that are hard for us to be around. Right? So this whole season is really just about preparation. But I again want to encourage us as part of our preparation to focus on the true meaning of Christmas. That we believe something utterly amazing happened on the day that we celebrate as Christmas. We believe that God came to earth in the form of Jesus to rescue humanity. That humanity had gotten so distant from God that Jesus said, I want to reestablish that relationship. And I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do the work to bring us back together. I'm going to do the work to restore that relationship. I'll do the work. I'm just simply asking you to have faith that I'm doing it. That was God's plan for rescuing humanity. So in this series that we called Prep Squad, by the way, that was the cool picture I wanted to show you last week when the TVs didn't work. Right? So we were part of the Prep Squad, and what I mean by that is that we are called to prepare for Christmas, to prepare ourselves, but also be willing to invest in the lives of those around us, so that we actually can bring together this idea of the joy of Christmas. Because that's what we're focused on this week, is this theme of joy and embracing the joy of Christmas. And the thing about emotions like joy, sometimes they just don't come as easily as we would like them to. That life comes along, the challenges of life, the difficulties of life, and those experiences begin to dominate our thoughts. And that is just natural. So what we want to do is we want to actually take this time to say, you know what? I'm going to choose to look at the good things in my life. I'm going to choose to find those positive things. I'm not going to ignore reality. I'm not going to say I don't have difficulties. I'm simply saying I'm not going to focus on them. We need to have that kind of intentionality. Because the reality is that one of the things that seems to happen at Christmas time is that all emotions get magnified. The positive ones can get magnified. We can get very excited, very kind of up and big, particularly for children, right? It can get so big. And boy, to be able to kind of embrace the joy that a child has as we look to Christmas. But also the negative emotions can get really big at Christmas time too. That if we are feeling lonely, we feel more lonely than ever. If we're feeling forgotten, we feel more forgotten than ever. So what I invite all of us to do during this Christmas season is let's make sure that the people in our lives don't feel forgotten. Because there's something amazing about joy. Joy is contagious, which I debated using that word given that we're 2 years into a pandemic. But joy is contagious. And what's interesting is that it's a cycle of contagion in the sense that if I'm feeling down and someone comes up to me and they have a little bit of joy, and they share that with me, somehow it starts to pick me up. And what's interesting is it picks me up, what does it do for them? Picks them up. And we go back and forth. So as part of this season of Christmas, let's reach out to the people in our lives. Let's think of those people who maybe don't have other people in their lives very often. Or let's be willing to not worry about who was right or wrong in that fight that we have with someone, and simply say that my relationship with you is more important than who's right. And in that, let's share our joy. So, as we look to what happened on Christmas Day, the reading that we looked at today really kind of captures the reason for the joy of Christmas. And if you notice that opening song, that kind of opening part I had you listen to, that actually comes from a very familiar voice, at least for us old people anyway, which is really scary. That's the Charlie Brown Christmas cartoon. It was released the year I was born. And that was 56 years ago. So that is a long time for a cartoon to keep rolling. And what's interesting is that the opening part of that is Linus, the character Linus. And it's from the Charlie Brown Christmas. And so if you watch that cartoon, you know that there's this thing going on that Charlie Brown starts up with the huge expectations for Christmas, that Christmas is going to be different this year. And it feels like it's not. And Charlie Brown kind of gets, as Charlie Brown always does, gets beat down pretty well throughout the cartoon. But as Charlie Brown is just about ready to completely give up, his friend Linus, and Linus, I think is such an amazing character. Brian and I were talking about this, is that you look at Linus, sucking his thumb and carrying his blanket, and he looks like he's childish. But he's like a sage, right? He's like the one who sees things that no one else sees. And the thing I thought about that, him kind of carrying his blanket around, we're all carrying some kind of security blanket. Linus just lets us see his. And maybe that's the healthiest thing of all. And as Linus talks to his friend Charlie Brown, who is so down, Linus takes his joy and he shares it with Charlie Brown. And as Charlie Brown is so beat up about commercialism and all these things that haven't worked out, Linus says, but don't worry, Charlie Brown. Here's the real meaning of Christmas. And what Linus goes on to read is a longer version of what Bonnie and Jonathan read for us this morning. Because in that, we start to see who Jesus is and what Jesus is here for. Now, the reading that Bonnie and Jonathan did for us this morning comes from the Gospel of Luke. Now, what we call the Gospel of Luke is simply Luke's account of the life of Jesus. In fact, any of the 4 books we call Gospels are simply something someone wrote down about the life of Jesus. And one of the things that I really like about the Gospel of Luke or the book of Luke is that we want to remember that Luke never thought he was writing the Bible. There wouldn't be a Bible for 300 more years, or about 200 more years. Luke was simply saying that there's a lot of people out there talking about this Jesus guy, and some people are saying some things, and some people are saying other things. And Luke said, no, I want to go out and kind of gather the information. Because the 4 Gospels, right, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Matthew, Mark, and John are all either recorded by apostles or on the behalf of apostles. In other words, those 3 are either written by or written on behalf of people who actually walked with Jesus, actually knew Jesus personally. Luke never knew Jesus. And so Luke sets out to actually record kind of in this kind of independent fashion what happened. In fact, if we go to the very beginning of Luke's gospel, he tells us what he's setting out to do. Luke says that, having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus, so you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. So what Luke did is Luke went out and started doing research. He says there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, and some stuff has been written. So I'm going to look at what other people have written. I'm going to investigate what's behind that. And I'm going to talk to people who either knew Jesus or knew people who knew Jesus. I'm going to start pulling all that stuff together. And Luke was kind of uniquely qualified to do this because Luke was actually a medical doctor by profession. So Luke was actually a very educated person, and he was also a very effective writer. In fact, the theologians tell us that if we go back and we look at the Greek writing that Luke used to produce what we call the Gospel of Luke, it's actually written like a scientific journal entry of the time. So he wanted to go out there and objectively dig into it and understand what's going on. And that's what gives us the Gospel of Luke. Now, one of the big questions in the Gospel of Luke, where he says, most honorable Theophilus, no one knows who Theophilus is. And what makes it kind of challenging is the Greek word that's translated as Theophilus can be a proper name, like Bonnie or Jonathan or Nicole or Annie, or it can be the title of a highly learned person, kind of like professor, that sort of thing. So we don't know if he's actually addressing someone by name or addressing someone by title, so we don't really know who it is. But here's the thing that's kind of interesting. If you take the Greek word that's translated as Theophilus, its literal translation is beloved of God. And I'm like, beloved of God? Isn't that all of us? So now the theologians tell us that that is not what Luke meant. Luke was trying to address someone individually, but I think Luke was writing for all of us and didn't even know it. That he's saying, you who are beloved of God, I have done the research so that you can know with confidence what happened. That's what Luke set out to do. Now, as he tells us in his gospel, Luke, as he tells us in gospel, kind of what happens at the birth of Jesus. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy from what we talked about last week. Remember last week when we were talking about hope, we looked at the Gospel of John. And remember that John wanted us to understand who Jesus is, that Jesus is the creator of the world. That John tells us that Jesus was with God because Jesus is God. And he's the creator of the world. So the one who came to rescue humanity, the one who came to give us renewed life, is the one who created life in the first place, the one uniquely qualified to change everything. That's what John tells us about who Jesus is. Now, if the creator of the world comes to the world, we would expect this birth in human form to be some glorious event, right? Surrounded by royalty, right? Surrounded by the most important people in the world. The emperor should have been there. The religious leaders should have been there. But that's not what happened. In fact, if we look at the circumstances of Jesus' birth, it's very different from that, right? Because at this point, we have all likely heard some version of the Christmas story. That we know that Mary, his mother, was not a wealthy person. We know that he was not born into high-end circumstances. We always say he was born in a manger. What's a manger? An animal stable. It's a stable, a place where animals are kept, oftentimes a cave, yes. So it's a place where animals are kept. That's where he was born. Not the sort of birth that we might expect for the creator of the world coming to the world he created. So what's going on with that? Well, as we look at Luke's gospel, we get to see. So picking up with the reading that Bonnie and Jonathan did for us, it says, "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified." Now, one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that as we read things like this, that we have probably heard more times than we can count. We hear shepherds, and like, well, they're shepherds, there are people out there. But in the first century, shepherd was not a job you generally wanted your kids to have. It was a hard job. It was a dirty job. Not saying sheep are easy now at all. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying there's more respect now is all I'm saying. All right. Some of you folks don't know we have sheep herders in our congregation. I don't know if herders, but sheep farmers. What is the right word? Are you farmers? Are you herders? Shepherds? We'll go with shepherds. You guys are leaving me hanging there. Come on. Help me out here. All right, is that as we think about this idea of shepherds, we don't realize that in that culture, shepherds were kind of outcasts. It was not a respected position. And so these shepherds, these people who generally are living kind of not kind of part of the core society, are just out here just doing their job at night. I mean, living in the fields, living with their animals. And then suddenly this angel shows up. Or to them, it's probably just a person, right? Or kind of, but it looks very different. It talks about the glory of the Lord shone around them. And what does that mean? I've always pictured that as a big, bright light. I don't really know what it is. But I'm sure it got their attention. And that last part, and they were terrified. Yeah, right? Of course they're terrified. We're just out here doing our job, and this guy shows up, and there's light everywhere. What does all this mean? Now, why does the angel show up? Luke tells us. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born you. He is the Messiah, the Lord." So he tells them that Messiah, this individual that the Jewish people had been waiting for literally centuries, the Savior is here. He has arrived. He is the one that you have been waiting for. But again, he doesn't announce it to the emperor. He doesn't announce it to the religious leaders. He announces it to the shepherds. He went to the outsiders. He went to the ones who were largely unaccepted. Why did he do that? Well, the reason is in what the angel says. The angel says, "I bring good news that will cause great joy for all the people." What God wanted to make abundantly clear, that Jesus, the creator of all things, did not come just for the special people. He did not come for the people who had done everything right. That he had literally come for everyone. He was a gift to all people. And the point that God makes in doing this, that this was completely orchestrated by God. He did it exactly the way he wanted it done. And in doing that, he reached out to these shepherds saying that, you know what? People may look down on you, but I don't look down on you. Yeah, I know you've got mistakes in your life. I know there are challenges that you're still battling with, that there are issues that you just can't break free from. None of that gets in the way. I have come here for you. I have come to be your Savior, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what your struggles are. And this idea that Jesus had come for all people, no matter what they were dealing with, was not something that just happened on Christmas night. It wasn't that the angel made this big announcement and it never comes up ever again. As we follow the life and ministry of Jesus, this is something that he did constantly, that he was always out looking for those people who had been forgotten, for those people who were on the outside, making it clear that he is available to all people, that renewed life through Jesus is available to all people, especially those who feel on the outside, especially those who feel like they've been ignored. The same sort of people that the birth of Jesus was announced to was the same people that Jesus would spend his ministry reaching out to, and encourages us to be a part of that family, even now. That's the cause of the joy we have at Christmas. Not just about what happened on that day, which is of course huge and important. But the joy is that on Christmas Day, it began a renewal beyond anything we could imagine. Even anything beyond the original theologians of that time could have imagined. That God was doing something bigger than anyone could imagine. And Luke wants to make this really clear, that Jesus is out there reaching and talking to and connecting with the people who are on the outside. In fact, as Luke documents the adult life of Jesus, he records something that I think is so important. He says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. Now, for context, a tax collector here is a Jewish person who was collecting taxes from Jewish people on behalf of the Roman government. They were considered traitors to their own people, yet they came and heard what Jesus had to say. And I love this phrase, other notorious sinners. What's a notorious sinner? Yeah, well, kind of, yeah, me, right? Me, yeah, much of my life for certain. Not that I'm not a sinner now, I was just a bigger sinner then, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I think anyway. Yeah, that's a good one, right? In my research, what we believe is what Luke was trying to capture is that because their society was so religious-based, notorious sinners were simply people who didn't follow the religious practices of the time. That in their culture, not doing religion the way they said it should be done made you a notorious sinner. And so what Luke is pointing out to us is that if sometimes you don't feel like you fit, that you don't fit the religious norm, or maybe the way that we live our lives doesn't fit other people's expectations of how we should live our lives, or maybe sometimes we just don't feel like we fit anywhere. The point that Jesus is making is that you fit here. We all fit here because Jesus came for all of us. And the key thing that Jesus is doing is that as he extends this idea of a renewed life, as he extends salvation, he calls us into family. That we come together and we support one another. And in that we begin to fit together as we walk together with our challenges and all together. That's the joy that we have because of Christmas. And as Jesus was out there doing his adult ministry and preaching to people and talking to people and interacting with people, it was so many of the good people who ignored what he was doing, who didn't care what he had to say. But the outsiders, the hurting, the lonely, those with challenges that they couldn't break free from, they were hungry for what he had to say. And they embraced the message of Jesus. And in that, they found a joy they didn't even know existed. And part of what created this powerful relationship between Jesus and so many of those people is that, first of all, Jesus looked at them as people, and he connected with them, and he invited them into relationship. But then he also did something else really important. He spoke truth to people, but he did it with compassion. When he encountered people who were doing things in their lives that were hurting themselves, he would say, please stop. That's hurting you. You need to stop. But he never condemned them for it. He embraced them with compassion as they dealt with the issues that they had. He helped them to understand that God's love is unconditional. It doesn't matter what you're battling with. It doesn't matter where you're stuck. It doesn't change God's love for you. And that's what Jesus was extending to them. And that's what Jesus extends to us today. The thing is that Jesus showed us that we don't have to be fine. I mean, think about it. How often do we feel like we're just expected to pretend that we're fine? That, I got these thoughts in my head, and I'm hating myself, and I feel so dark, and I'm so torn down. But if someone says to me, how you doing? I'm going to go, I'm fine. I'm fine. Right? Or if I've got some habit that I know is steadily killing me, and I can't break free of it. And if someone could just help me, maybe I could get to the other side. But when you ask me how I'm doing, what am I going to say? I'm fine. The gift that we receive on Christmas, the reason we have joy in Christmas, is Jesus calls us into a relationship where we don't have to say we're fine. Basically, Jesus tells us that not fine is just fine for being part of my family. And that's what he calls us into. He calls us to relationship with him, and he calls us into honest relationship with one another, to support each other in that relationship. That no matter where we come from, no matter what we've done, no matter what we're still stuck doing, we are called to be in his family. Now, there's a song that I really like that really captures this. It's called God So Loved by We the Kingdom. It's not a Christmas song, so I'm not going to play it, and I'm not going to sing it, okay? But there are some really powerful lyrics in this song that I think really captures the reason for our joy at Christmas. It says, bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting there with open arms. My friends, that is the gift that we have because of Christmas. That is the reason for our joy, that we are all invited into the family of God exactly as we are. And in that we experience renewed life. In that we begin to find joy, and we begin to share that joy together. And in that, our joy grows, but also our healing grows. That this kind of attitude that I've got to get all my stuff together before I go to church is exactly the opposite. It's connect with God, and in that he accepts us where we are, and we walk it out together. And in that we accept each other as we are, and we walk in it together. That's the joy we have on Christmas Day. So as we, as a family, come together, the thing we want to do is embrace this message of Jesus, this thing that Jesus modeled for us, that he first built relationships. And in relationships, he earned the right to speak truth. That he earned the ability to be heard in truth, speaking truth in compassion. And in compassion, giving each person and each of us the time we need to heal as we need to heal as part of his family. If we can learn to love others as God loves us, if we can learn to speak to others as Jesus speaks to us, that's how things begin to change. Begin to change in our own lives, begin to change in our existing family, and in what empowers us to share the joy that we have found with other people. That is our joy on Christmas. And as I started out, one of the magical things about joy is that it grows as we share it. Our own joy grows, help extend it to other people, and in that our own joy grows more. And so what I'm going to encourage everyone to do, as I will do every week in Advent, the easiest way to share the joy that we have is to invite someone to church on Christmas Eve. Right? Invite them out. And as I mentioned, we are doing something brand new. Right? We're doing something that we have never done here before. I'm stepping out. I'm trusting you guys to invite people. We're doing 2 services on Christmas Eve. 2 services with very different formats. So at 5 o'clock, we've got what we're calling the modern service. Another name might be a contemporary service. And at 7 o'clock, we're doing a traditional service. And so the structure there is that the modern service are going to be songs that you know from Christmas, but done in a much more upbeat, modern style, as well as the fact we may mix in some you don't know yet. And we will actually leverage media to kind of bring that out a bunch more. The 7 o'clock one will be full-on traditional. The traditional hymns done their traditional way. So that's important for a couple of reasons. One, whatever it is you like, whatever format you like, we got it. But more important than that, if we are called to share the joy that we have found, we need to invite other people into it. What a low barrier way to say, just on Christmas Eve. I'm not asking for long-term commitments. I'm just saying, just come with me on Christmas Eve. And come to the service that fits that person. If it's a younger person, probably modern. If it's someone who's not really familiar with Christianity, modern one's probably the way to go. But you know that person, I don't. But for those in your lives who have a history of church that maybe have kind of floated away, or those who just kind of like the classic way that Christmas is done, 7 o'clock, invite them to that one. I'm going to ask you to stretch yourselves. I'm going to ask everybody to not just invite one person, but invite two people. Just invite 2 people. It can make all the difference. I will tell you that as we step out and we embrace the joy that we have through Jesus, and we share that with other people, in that, our joy will grow and their joy will grow.